What if I told you that Lewis Hamilton not only had a failure in his car, but that he took advantage of that critical moment to drop a bomb that could completely change the future of Ferrari? Can we really trust what Ferrari says, when their own drivers no longer do? The final lap of the 2025 United States Grand Prix was the scene of a silent betrayal. Lewis Hamilton, fourth on the track, was at the limit. He knew that he had George Russell on his heels, that every thousandth counted, that there was no margin for error. And yet, what ended up marking that return was not a tactical decision, nor a risky maneuver. It was the collapse of something much deeper, the trust between a driver and his team. It all started almost imperceptibly in turn 4. A slight loss of grip, a late response from the car. But it was in turn 5 where the SF25 showed its true intentions. The car did not turn. Not because Hamilton made a driving error, but because something in the chassis or in the management of the front axle simply did not obey. Hamilton's first reaction was instinctive. He thought of a possible puncture. But the car did not vibrate as usually happens with a damaged tire. It was something else, something I couldn't see but I could feel. At that moment, with the pressure of a Mercedes breathing down his neck, Hamilton had to make decisions in fractions of a second. He took his foot off the accelerator. He adjusted his style. But the worst was yet to come. At turn 11, one of the most demanding braking areas of the Circuit of the Americas, the car simply did not respond. He braked late. He braked badly. He braked as if disconnected from his own will. From the pits, Ferrari informed him that the sensors say that everything is fine. And that was the key moment. Because that phrase, apparently neutral, marked an emotional abyss. As Hamilton struggled with an unpredictable machine, his team responded with cold data, as if telemetry had more authority than the driver's own experience. This gap between what Hamilton felt and what the engineers saw, rather than a technical error, represented a communication crisis, a failure in the chain of trust. When a driver of Hamilton's stature, with more than 2 decades of experience, says that something is not right, the first reflex cannot be to dismiss it with numbers on the screen. Because F1 is not run from a desk. You run with your body, with your reflexes, with your soul glued to the asphalt. Subsequent telemetry confirmed Hamilton's suspicions. There was an abrupt loss of power. A disconnection from the energy flow expected by the hybrid system. The car was not in normal condition. And yet, from the wall, they treated him as if he were. This disparity between human perception and digital data not only generates frustration, generates distrust. And that mistrust, in the world of Formula One, can be lethal. For a driver like Hamilton, who has just joined Ferrari with the hope of fighting for a title again, this incident was not just an anecdote. It was a red alert. A sign that perhaps the problem is not only in the car, but in how uncomfortable truths are managed within Maranello. What happened after the race in Austin was, in many ways, more shocking than what was experienced on the track. During the moments after the GP, Riccardo Adami, Hamilton's race engineer and a highly credible figure within the paddock, offered a series of statements that not only confirmed the British driver's suspicions, but also laid bare a reality that Ferrari had tried to cover up for weeks. What it revealed was not an isolated failure, nor a one-off reliability incident. It was the exposure of a structure in crisis. And this is where the real drama begins. Because this confession not only confirms that Ferrari was not completely honest with its drivers or the media, it also directly questions Frédéric Vasseur's technical and strategic leadership. When an engineer is forced to come forward and expose what the team has preferred to hide, it is an unequivocal sign that there is internal discontent, and possibly a fracture between the operational levels and the decision-making leadership. Hamilton, who from day one made it clear that he did not come to Ferrari to stroll around, but to compete at the highest level, is now in the middle of an institutional storm. The message implicit in the bomb dropped by Adami is devastating. Ferrari's management has not only been technically deficient, but has been strategically opaque. While the drivers fought on the track with unpredictable cars, at Maranello image control was prioritized over actual problem solving. This hits directly at Vasseur, the man who was brought in to stabilize Ferrari after years of chaos. His management had, until then, been considered pragmatic and patient. But this revelation changes the narrative completely. If the technical faults were known and were decided not to be addressed urgently or even deliberately hidden, then we are not dealing with a simple question of mechanical reliability. We are facing a failure in the decision-making model. What happened in Austin showed that Ferrari has lost control of both. And the most alarming thing is that the crisis was triggered not by the press, nor by an external leak, but by an internal, authorized voice with direct access to the data. Riccardo Adami is not an outsider. He is one of the most trusted men in the Ferrari box. If he breaks ranks, it is because something very serious is happening within the team. Hamilton, meanwhile, became the perfect vehicle for these truths to emerge. His presence, his reputation, his ability to read the car better than anyone, make any word he says weighs more than an entire season of official statements. And now, with this technical bomb exploded, Ferrari's story is in ruins. What was once attempted to be disguised as a process of adaptation has been revealed as chaos disguised as planning. When Lewis Hamilton crossed the finish line in Austin, his radio message was brief, almost whispered, but it carried the weight of a bitter confession. "We were going too slow, mate." There were no screams. There was no anger. Just a mixture of resignation and disappointment, the kind of disappointment that can only be born when someone has given everything, and yet has been betrayed by their machine. But this message was not only a judgment on the last lap of the Grand Prix. It was the culmination of an emotional process that had been brewing for months. Since his arrival at Ferrari, Hamilton had shown total commitment. He changed his driving style. It adapted to the car. He modified his strategic approach, all with the intention of maximizing the potential of the SF25. And yet, each effort seemed to be diluted in a sea of technical inefficiency and evasive responses from the wall. The SF25 does not allow you to attack. That's obvious. It doesn't have the stability necessary to brake late and deep, nor the traction to aggressively exit slow corners. Its braking behavior has been erratic, and its power delivery intermittent. Under normal conditions, this would be frustrating. But for a driver of his caliber, accustomed to cars that obey his orders to the millimeter, this car represents a prison on wheels. The phrase, "we were too slow," hides multiple layers. On a superficial level, it's a no-brainer. The pace was not competitive. But on a deeper level, it is a devastating sentence. The team that promised to give him a car to fight for the title is not even close to fulfilling that promise. And worse still, he doesn't seem to understand why. Here another dimension of the problem is revealed: Hamilton's progressive isolation within the Ferrari ecosystem. At Mercedes, for years, it was the epicenter of the technical project. His sensations translated into immediate changes. At Ferrari, on the other hand, their feedback seems to fall into the void. Not because it is not listened to, but because it is not acted upon. And that, in an environment where tenths are decided in milliseconds, is unforgivable. Beyond the technical failure, beyond the sensors, what truly resonates is the feeling of helplessness. Because Hamilton is not losing races because of his mistakes. It is losing due to structural limitations of a poorly conceived and poorly managed car. And that is a frustration that corrodes from within. It's not about whether the car is bad or not. The point is that even with all his talent, effort, adaptation, and career reading, it is still insufficient to change the team's destiny. The most ironic thing is that this situation is not new for Ferrari. Over the years, it has been a constant. The creation of expectations, the redemption narrative, the promise that this will be the year, only to crash again and again against the same technical and strategic errors. But now there is a key difference. This time, the man inside the car is not just any driver. He is the most successful driver in the history of Formula One. And when a name like his starts to show cracks in his confidence, the credibility of the entire project collapses. This final act is not just about a failed career. It deals with the possible collapse of a shared dream. Hamilton's dream to return Ferrari to the top, and Ferrari's dream to redeem itself in the face of its history. Therefore, every word he said on that radio was like an emotional stab, not only for his engineers, but for the millions of fans who were waiting to see the prancing horse re-emerge with him at the wheel. And now the question is inevitable: how deep is the damage? Is this emotional fracture between Hamilton and Ferrari reversible? Do you think Hamilton will take control of this chaos and transform it into glory? Or are we witnessing, in slow motion, the most painful disappointment of his career? Leave me in the comments what you think about all this.